What's going on, guys? Welcome back to this video. Today's video is TryHackMe's turn, and we will start with intro to cybersecurity pathway. Now, why did I choose intro to cybersecurity? Because it walks you up from ground zero to other paths, as you can see here. There are other paths, but I recommend starting with either intro to cybersecurity or pre-security to build your knowledge from the ground up. Okay, if we go to intro to cybersecurity and learn what are the rooms involved. So first we have three modules: intro to cybersecurity, intro to offensive security, and intro to defensive security. I think the authors have divided the subjects pretty much well, because you're required to know what's the difference between offensive and defensive security. At the end, if you're gonna work in cybersecurity, you're gonna work either in offensive or defensive. Sometimes you might go hybrid depending on the situation, but most of the time, usually you will be focusing your work and your skills on one of these fields. So in this path, you will learn what does it mean when we say offensive security, and on the other hand, what does it mean by saying defensive security. So the first module here we have intro to offensive security, intro to defensive security. So these rooms, I have done these rooms before. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to dedicate a playlist and put all of the videos that we have completed unintentionally, not as part of this path previously, into a playlist titled as Intro to Cybersecurity TryHackMe. So you will be able to get back to this playlist if you want to answer, if you are stuck in a question in these rooms that I have solved before and not as part of this pathway. Intro to defensive, offensive. Okay, and we have careers in cyber. As you can see, this room is not done yet, so we're gonna do this room together. Intro to offensive security, then we have application security, operating systems, network security, and lastly we have intro to defensive security. Here we talk about the blue team activities, forensics, incident response, security operation centers, so on and so forth. So today's video will be about web application security, the first room in intro to offensive security. So application security is a very simplified version or a very simplified intro to web applications. So if you are stuck in understanding what are web applications and what does it mean when we say web application security and the OWASP top 10, it's recommended, guys, to start with this room. So in the introduction here, we see intro about the web applications. What are web applications? How they are different from programs we install on the PC. So simply saying, web applications are programs that you can access through the web. As you can see, there are some examples of applications. Webmail is a web application, right? We can access through the web. So anything you can access through the web is called application that's accessed through the web. In other words, we call it web application. So your emails, the emails you access through your browser, the website, all of these are applications. They are run on applications and exposed to the public. So we call this combination of an application running on the PC and exposed to the public to be accessed through the browser. We call it a web application. There are many types of web applications, guys. As you can see, we have web applications that you can access mainly through your browser. Mainly they are websites. So they are in the form of websites. Everything that you access through a browser, it is called a web application. So why don't we call it website? Why just we call them web application, right? The reason for that is because web applications comprise more than websites. So a website is a web application, but a web application is not a website. Website is also a web application. Also, webmail is a web application. So when you access your email, like Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo or any other mail provider, you are accessing a webmail, not a website. So when I say I want to access my email, I'm not going to say I'm going to access the website of my email. It doesn't work like that. You're going to say I'm going to access my email or the webmail that is powering my email or the emails around the world. Okay. And another example of application is online shopping websites, e-commerce websites can be called websites, and therefore they can be considered as web applications, of course. But we cannot say that webmail is a website, right? It cannot be said that webmail is a website. Also, Google Drive. Google Drive is actually kind of storage, file storage, online file storage. But do we call it a website? Nope. Yeah, we might say go to Google and access Google Drive. So the actual correct word of Google Drive is a web application, and the type of that application is file storage, right? So that's the difference between a web application and a website. Let's scroll down. As you can see, this is an example of a website running an e-commerce or online banking, right? Here are, if you want to understand the mechanism of how e-commerce works, you can read through these details. As you can see, for example, you are accessing an online shopping web application, okay? Or we can say website. We can say it's a website. It's still a website, e-commerce website. So how it works, every web application or every online shopping uses database. So at least one database. Normally the database is a products database. So when you shop online, you are interacting with the products database to retrieve the products, their prices, and browse the inventory of the other products. If you want to search the products online, you're actually searching the database powering these products or storing these products. Customers database. Now here, if you are talking about maybe customer relationship management systems, CRMs, they use customer databases. So when you have CRMs, you store the customer data, right? So the customer data are stored in customer database, and we have sales database as well. Now all of these can be part of online shopping. So when you browse the online shopping, you are browsing the products database. But because there are security permissions that prevent you from accessing the customer database, you won't see it. Same or likewise the sales database. So the question here is, what do you need to access? What do you need, okay, to access a web application? Of course, a browser. So the rule of thumb is a web application can only be accessed through a browser. We cannot say, if you do an Nmap scan and you found that there is a 22 port open, there is 25 port open, SSH, Telnet, whatsoever. You cannot call these web applications because you cannot interact with them with a browser. So everything that cannot be interacted with using a browser, it's definitely not a web application. So I think by now we deciphered what does it mean, or what does web application mean. Now here, briefly, the authors of this room talked about some of the web application vulnerabilities. Now, if you want a complete list of the most popular web application vulnerabilities, they can be found through the OWASP top 10 main page. Here we can explore the top 10 application security risks divided here. So they change year by year depending on the updates. But for this year, these are the updated version of the web application security risks. Now, this video is not dedicated to explaining every single one of them, but we're going to go briefly through every single one of these to explain what do they mean. So I'm not gonna use these explanations on here, but we can answer the questions, don't worry. So the first one is a broken access control. So broken access control is when a user is able to access parts of the web application, such as pages, profile pages, product pages, while they are not authorized to do that. So for example, if a user can access the profile page of another user, okay, here we can say safely and with a certain tone that there is a broken access control vulnerability on the site, because a user is able to access the data of another user. The data can be the profile page, that there can be a product page, so on and so forth. One of the most popular forms of broken access control is the IDOR vulnerability, indirect object reference, insecure direct object reference. So briefly, what does it mean by saying broken access control? Now, previously in my YouTube videos, I have a huge playlist of scenarios comprising videos on penetration testing on web applications. I'm gonna put the link of the playlist in the comment section. Cryptographic failures. Cryptographic failures here has to do with broken encryption. So if you are using weak encryption key or weak encryption algorithm to encrypt the data, here we talk about cryptographic failures. Also, if you are transferring the data through HTTP, as you can see, we have HTTPS. So if you see a website that doesn't use HTTPS, rather it uses HTTP, it means that there is a cryptographic failure on the site. Data is transferred in clear text. Injection. Injection is the most popular and most dangerous form or dangerous vulnerability that could hit oh my god that could hit a web application. So it can be cross-site scripting, it can be SQL injection, it can be HTML injection, it can be JavaScript injection. There are many forms of injections. The ultimate objective of injection is to access sensitive data stored in the form of customer database or user database or database itself, products database. On some scenarios, or in some scenarios, we might aim to convert the injection into a shell access. This is apparent in SQL injection. Sometimes you can run or start from SQL injection and end up as a user accessing a system. Insecure design. Insecure design is a new category for 2021 with a focus on risks related to design flows. If you genuinely want to move left as an industry, it calls for more use of threat modeling, secure design patterns. Now, insecure design here, mostly it talks about insecure coding. So when a code is compiled or written insecurely, or if it has many bugs or some bugs, it can be exploited, right? So these web applications vulnerabilities, they cover some of the bugs that can hit a code, but a code can contain more bugs, right? That's what we call by insecure design. Security misconfiguration. Now here we talk about default credentials, default configurations that are left when first installing the product, or first installing, for example, Apache Web Server, Nginx, any other server. So when first installing a program, if you leave the defaults as is, if you leave the default username and password as is, if you leave the configuration file with the default configurations, we call the security misconfigurations. Directory indexing is an example of security misconfiguration. Vulnerable and outdated components. Now this covers everything that is outdated. So if your web server is outdated, if the software you're using for your database is outdated, we call this vulnerable and outdated components. Identification and authentication failures. Now this is mentioned here in this room. Identification and authentication failure. And this vulnerability exists when you are able to compromise the login form of any site by using brute force or by using weak passwords. We can say safely that there is identification and authentication failures. Software and data integrity failures. If you're able to modify data on the application, right, we have an integrity failure. Security logging and monitoring failures. If there is no monitoring and logging mechanism on the web application that can enable you to audit for errors, audit for security breaches, we can say that security logging and monitoring failure exist on the site. And lastly, this is the one that has been added new. It is server-side request forgery. And we covered this many times. in my channel. You can just go to the channel and search for SSRF, or you can search it in my website as well to find many videos on server-side request forgery. And note, it is very different from server-side template injection. I see some people mix between these both. The one that is under OWASP is SSRF. SSRF covers a scenario where you are able to let the web server execute or browse to pages you want. It is similar to remote file inclusion, right? But it has more impact than remote file inclusion. So in this room, they covered the identification and authentication failure. They covered broker access control, injection, and cryptographic failures. Let's go answer the questions. You discovered that the login page allows an unlimited number of login attempts without trying to slow down the user or lock the account. What is the category of security risk? So since it targets the login functionality, it means there is a brute force attempt. So brute force, if successful, it means either the password is weak. It's definitely the password is weak. If you're able to guess the password of an admin user using the brute force or dictionary attacks, it means that the password is weak. Or you have a superior word list. And it means also that there is rate limiting absence. Rate limiting is a mechanism where you limit the number of attempts against a login form or against any certain functionality on a site. So we call this identification and authentication failure. You noticed that the username and password are sent in clear text without encryption. What's the category of the security risk? It is cryptographic failures. Alright, so there is this practical example of application security. Now in this example, they talk about IDOR, this one, insecure direct object reference. IDOR is an example of broken access control. Now what is IDOR? Let's demonstrate that with a scenario. So in the scenario here, we have a website that was victim to an attack. The attacker managed to mix up the shipments. So if you go to planned shipments, you can see here that there are product lines that belong to scooter, motorcycle, gathered under the bike assembly. And here we see, as you can see, the bikes and motorcycles, they are categorized or planned to be shipped under the scooter assembly. So the attacker has managed to mix categories with different sections or different lines. So this will lead to the products getting to the wrong destinations. Alright, so what's your job here? The job is to, using the IDOR vulnerability in this site, you have to revert the changes. So there is the attackers used or took advantage of a user, okay, and did all of these changes. Your job is to find that user and revert the changes. It's simple. So the demonstration of IDOR goes like this. As you can see, take a look at this URL. The URL contains a parameter user underscore ID, and it has a value, numerical value. Now IDOR is demonstrated simply by manipulating URL parameters. Not only IDOR, many web application vulnerabilities. That's why I always say that URLs are a playground for penetration testing or for web application testing. If you see parameters and you see a value here, it means there is a way to test if this site is vulnerable to some web application vulnerability like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and broken access control. So here we have a number. When you have a number, it means that there are other numbers. So this number is used to represent this employee or this page. It means other numbers are used to represent or dedicated for other users. So what if we change this to 10 and try to access? If we're able to access, it means we have broken access control because we are accessing data that doesn't belong to us. We are able to see, as you can see. This is the profile page of the employee ID 10. Now 9. As you can see, we're able to access the profile page of Elia. And it happens that Elia has done all of the changes. right? So your job is to click on revert, 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 all these changes, and you will get the flag. Okay, let's go back here. So that was an introduction, guys, to web applications and web application security. So when we say web application security, it means the knowledge about the different web application vulnerabilities and the methods or the valid ways used to secure against all of these vulnerabilities. So when we have, if your website is vulnerable to one of these vulnerabilities, it's very recommended that you hurry up and patch it. So most of the time these days, if your website is running on WordPress or Joomla or another popular CMS, content management system, I'm not gonna say you are 100%. Of course, no one is 100% secure from these vulnerabilities, but most content management systems are managed by the vendor, namely WordPress, Joomla, Wix, Shopify. There are many other. I'm not gonna list all of them now, but most of the security is managed by these providers. So your responsibility is to protect your website. Your website is part of the platform, namely WordPress, for example. So your job is to do minimal work, like installing some security plugins, like WordFence or iTheme security. There are many security plugins you can install on WordPress, but it doesn't mean that you are immune to these attacks. From time to time, WordPress is hit with zero-day vulnerabilities that can sometimes contain one of these. So keep an eye out, and this was an introduction, guys, to application and application vulnerabilities and security. It was only an intro. We're gonna cover more in detail later. But if you are advanced and you know all of this knowledge and you want videos on application security, you can get back to my channel and browse the playlist. And here, guys, as you can see, I have also dedicated note file covering web application security and web application penetration testing. You can find this note file if you are subscribed to the channel membership, the cybersecurity notes membership. So that was it, guys, for today. I hope you liked the video, and I will see you later.